Leave and never return. That was the Christmas gift my parents gave me, delivered over a cooling roast beef while my 8-year-old daughter watched in confused silence. I thought the worst part was buckling her into the car while the guests stared through the front window. I was wrong. 5 minutes later, a county deputy tapped on the glass with a stack of papers that would turn my parents' eviction order into a war over their own home. The silence on the 33rd floor of Glasslight Tower was not empty. It was heavy with the specific, expensive weight of ownership. I stood in the center of the living room, my heels sinking into the deep pile of a rug I had selected from a catalog 3 months ago, and listened to the sound of absolutely nothing. There was no hum of a refrigerator that needed repair, no shouting from a neighbor through paper-thin drywall, and most importantly, no voice from my mother asking why I had spent money on a coffee without asking her first. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Crestfall Harbor. The water below was a sheet of hammered iron under the gray November sky. I pressed my hand against the glass. Cold, solid, mine. Closing on this penthouse had taken 5 years of aggressive saving, 2 promotions at Kestrel and Company Creative, and a level of financial discipline that bordered on obsession. But the money was only half the battle. The real war had been the secrecy. In my family, success was not celebrated as a personal achievement. It was identified, tagged, and harvested like a crop. My parents, Dennis and Linda Ross, viewed their children not as people to be nurtured, but as resources to be managed. If I had a spare bedroom, they had a storage need. If I had a bonus, they had a sudden car repair. If I had happiness, they had a crisis that required my immediate and undivided attention. Buying this place was my declaration of independence, signed in ink on a deed that did not bear their names. I checked my watch. 6 o'clock in the evening. The guests would be arriving in 30 minutes. I had kept the guest list deliberately small. It was a housewarming, but it felt more like a fortification ceremony. I had invited 3 close friends from university who knew the ugly details of my upbringing, and Elias Vance, my mentor and the senior partner at the agency. I had not invited my parents. I had not invited my sister, Brenna. I wanted one night where the air in my home belonged only to me. When the doorbell rang, the sound was melodic, a soft chime that echoed through the high ceilings. I smoothed the front of my black dress and opened the door. Elias was the first to arrive, holding a bottle of vintage wine wrapped in silver paper. He looked past me, his eyebrows rising as he took in the expanse of the entryway and the view beyond. "Hazel," he said, stepping inside, "you did not just buy a home, you bought a kingdom." I took the wine, feeling the flush of pride warm my face. "I needed this. I worked for it." "You did more than work for it," Elias said, walking toward the window. "You survived for it. There is a difference." By 7 o'clock, the living room was filled with the low hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal. My friends, Sarah, David, and Jenny, were curled on the sofas, shoes off, laughing at a story Elias was telling about a client who wanted to market dog food to cat owners. The lighting was low and warm. The city lights of Crestfall Harbor were beginning to flicker on below us, a sprawling grid of amber and white. For the first time in my life, I felt untethered. There was no guilt in the room. No one was scanning the furniture to see how much it cost. No one was asking for a loan. We were just people, drinking wine in a beautiful room, suspended above the world. I walked to the kitchen island to refill the appetizer tray. Sarah followed me, leaning her elbows on the marble counter. "Have you told them yet?" she asked quietly. I did not need to ask who she meant. I shook my head, arranging crackers in a neat row. "No, I'm going to let the weekend pass. I want to wake up here on Sunday morning without having had the conversation." Sarah took a sip of her wine. "You know they are going to find out. Crestfall is big, but it is not that big, and your mother has radar for money. She can smell a liquidity event from 3 towns over. Let her smell it," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "The deed is recorded. The keys are in my pocket. There is nothing they can do." Sarah looked at me over the rim of her glass. Her eyes were sympathetic but worried. It is not about what they can do legally, Hazel. It is about what they do emotionally. Just be ready. I nodded, but I pushed the thought away. I refused to let the ghost of my parents haunt the first night in my sanctuary. The party wound down around midnight. I locked the door after the last guest left, engaged the deadbolt, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I was alone. I was safe. I went to the master bedroom, which was large enough to fit the entire apartment I had lived in during my 20s, and fell asleep to the sound of the wind buffering against the glass. High above the reach of anyone who wanted to take this away from me. The peace lasted exactly 10 hours. At 10 o'clock the next morning, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, making espresso and watching the fog roll off the harbor. I looked at the screen. The contact name read, Mother. My stomach tightened. A reflexive, chemical reaction I had never been able to unlearn. I stared at the phone. If I did not answer, she would call back. Then she would call my work cell. Then she would call the front desk of the office. It was better to manage the intrusion than to let it escalate. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. Hello? Mother? Hazel? Her voice was bright, sugary, and entirely artificial. We heard the wonderful news. Why did you not tell us? I leaned against the counter, gripping my coffee mug. Who told you? Oh, does it matter? Mrs. Gable saw the listing close and saw your name on the registry. She called me immediately. A penthouse. Hazel, in Glasslight Tower. That is the most exclusive building in the harbor. We are so proud of you. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice flat. So, tell me, she continued, the sugar beginning to dissolve, revealing the steel beneath. How many bedrooms is it? 2. I said, 1 master, 1 guest, and bathrooms? 2.5. Wonderful. Her pause was calculated. And is there a guest suite? I mean, a proper one? With its own bath? Yes, there is. I could hear the smile in her voice, stretching across the phone line like a trap snapping shut. That is so sensible. It is always good to have space for family. You know, your father and I have been thinking about downsizing. The house is just so much work these days. I felt the walls of my kitchen inch closer. Mother, I just moved in yesterday. I am not looking for roommates. Oh, stop it. You are so dramatic. I'm not talking about moving in permanently, just that it is nice to know the option is there. You have done so well for yourself. Hazel, it is a blessing to be able to share that success. I did not answer. By the way, she said, her tone shifting to casual inquiry, what is the monthly carrying cost on a place like that? The HOA fees must be astronomical. I am handling it. I said, I know you are handling it. Sweetie, I am just asking. You know your father worries about you being over-leveraged. We just want to make sure you are not throwing money away on appearances when you could be investing in the family trust. The family trust. The black hole that my parents used to fund their vacations and bad real estate gambles while claiming it was for future generations. I have to go. Mother, I said, I have a meeting. On a Saturday? You work too hard. Do not forget who gave you that work ethic. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the marble. The silence of the apartment had changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt like it was holding its breath. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a biting wind. I arrived at Kestrel and Company Creative at 8 o'clock, burying myself in client briefs to wash away the residue of my mother's phone call. My office was a corner suite with a view of the city, though not as impressive as the one from my new living room. At 11 o'clock, my assistant, Jessica, knocked on the door. She looked uncomfortable. Hazel, your sister is here. I looked up from my laptop. Brenna? Does she have an appointment? No. Jessica lowered her voice. She is in the lobby. She is crying. She has a suitcase. I closed my eyes for a second, exhaling a long breath through my nose. Send her in. A moment later, Brenna Ross walked through the door. She was 26, 7 years younger than me, and she wore her chaos like a coat. Her mascara was smeared beneath her eyes. and she was dragging a large, scuffed rolling suitcase behind her. She looked exhausted, fragile, and terrified. "Hazel," she choked out, dropping the suitcase handle and wrapping her arms around herself. I stood up and walked around my desk. I did not hug her. I had learned that hugging Brenna was often an admission of liability. "What is going on? Brenna? Why do you have a suitcase? Todd kicked me out," she sobbed. "He said he needed space. He said I was too much. He put my things on the curb." "Hazel, I have nowhere to go." I looked at her. I loved my sister, but I knew her patterns. Brenna moved from crisis to crisis, usually funded by our parents or a string of boyfriends who eventually realized that her helplessness was a full-time job. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Why did you not go there?" "I cannot," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Dad is furious with me about the car loan I missed, and Mom just keeps lecturing me about my choices. I cannot deal with them right now. I just need a safe place. Hazel, just for a little while. Please." She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. It was a look she had perfected when we were children, usually after she had broken something of mine and wanted me to take the blame. I looked at the suitcase, then at the city skyline outside the window. I knew the danger of this. Letting Brenna in was like opening the door a crack during a hurricane. But she was my sister. And despite everything, I remembered what it was like to be 26 and feel like the world was hunting you. 2 weeks, I said. Brenna's face crumpled in relief. "Oh, thank you. Thank you. Hazel," I held up a hand. "Stop. Listen to me. 2 weeks, 14 days. You sleep in the guest suite. You do not get a key to the building. I will buzz you in. You do not invite anyone over. Not Todd, not Mom, not Dad, no one. And you actively look for an apartment starting tomorrow. I promise," she said, nodding rapidly. "I just need to get back on my feet. I promise I will be invisible." I wrote down my address on a sticky note and handed it to her. "Meet me there at 6 o'clock. Do not be late." That evening, I let Brenna into the building. I watched her reactions as we walked through the lobby. Most people looked at the marble floors and the chandelier with appreciation. Brenna looked at them with calculation. Her eyes darted to the concierge desk, the package room, the security cameras near the elevators. "Nice security," she murmured as we stepped into the private elevator that opened directly into my foyer. "It is necessary," I said, pressing the button for the 33rd floor. When the doors opened into the penthouse, Brenna gasped. She dropped her suitcase and walked into the living room, spinning slowly in a circle. "Hazel, this is insane. How did you afford this?" "Hard work," I said, closing the elevator doors. "The guest room is down the hall on the right. The bathroom is attached." She wandered toward the window, running her hand along the back of my velvet sofa. "It feels like a movie set. Do you have a maid?" "No." "A personal chef?" "No." "Brenna, I cook my own food." She turned to look at me, a strange, small smile playing on her lips. "You really made it, didn't you? Mom said you bought a nice place, but she did not say it was like this. She is going to flip when she sees it." "She is not going to see it," I said sharply. "Mom and Dad are not invited here. That is part of the deal. Brenna, if you tell them about this place, or if you let them in, you are out, immediately." Brenna held up her hands in surrender. Okay, I get it. You are the queen in the ivory tower. No parents allowed." I ordered takeout for dinner. We ate at the kitchen island. Brenna seemed to relax, talking about the breakup with Todd, painting herself as the victim of his emotional unavailability. I listened, nodding at the right times, but part of my brain was still on high alert. After dinner, I went to my study to answer a few emails. When I came out an hour later to get a glass of water, Brenna was not in her room. I found her in the hallway near the main entrance. She was standing on her tiptoes, looking closely at the video intercom system mounted on the wall. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped, spinning around. "Nothing. I was just figuring out how it works. In case I need to order food or something." "You do not need to order food," I said, And you do not need to touch the security system. If someone calls, it routes to my phone, right? Cool, she laughed. A brittle, nervous sound. High tech. Go to bed. Brenna. I watched her walk down the hall to the guest suite. She closed the door, but I stood there for a long time, staring at the intercom. It was a closed-loop system. There was nothing to figure out unless you were trying to see who had access logs. The next morning, I left for work before Brenna woke up. I left a note on the counter reminding her of the rules and the spare key fob that only worked for the elevator, not the front door of the building. When I returned that evening, I stopped at the concierge desk to pick up a package. The concierge, a young man named Leo, who wore his uniform with serious pride, smiled at me. "Good evening, Ms. Ross. How is the sister settling in?" "Fine, thank you," I said, taking the box. "She is very curious," Leo said pleasantly. I paused. "What do you mean?" "She came down this afternoon, asked a lot of questions about the building, how many units are on each floor, where the fire exits come out, how the guest list policy works. She said she was just safety conscious." My grip tightened on the cardboard box. Safety conscious. Brenna had never worn a seatbelt in her life. "Thank you for telling me. Leo, please do not give her any information about other residents or the security protocols." "Of course not. Ms. Ross." I walked toward the elevators, my heart beating a slow, angry rhythm. As I waited for the doors to open, a woman in a gray trench coat stepped up beside me. It was Maris Holt, my neighbor from across the hall. We had met briefly when I moved in. She was a corporate attorney, sharp-eyed and private. "Hazel," she said, nodding. "Maris." She looked straight ahead at the brushed steel doors. "I do not want to pry, but I thought you should know. Someone was asking about your unit this morning." I looked at her. "My sister?" "No, not your sister. An older woman. She was in the lobby when I was leaving for court. She was arguing with the front desk. She wanted to know if the penthouses have direct access from the freight elevator. She mentioned you by name." A cold stone formed in my stomach. What did she look like? Mid-50s, blonde bob, very stiff hair, expensive coat, but worn. She had a voice that carried. "My mother." The elevator arrived. We stepped in. "Did she get up?" I asked. "No," Maris said. Security turned her away, but she stood outside on the sidewalk for 20 minutes looking up at the balcony. "Just thought you should be aware." "Thank you." "Maris." I rode the rest of the way in silence. My mother had been here. She had not called. She had not buzzed. She had come to scout the perimeter. When I entered the apartment, Brenna was on the sofa, watching television. She looked up, smiling. "Hey, how was work?" I did not smile back. I walked to the kitchen, set down my package, and turned to face her. "Why were you asking Leo about the building security?" Brenna muted the TV. "I was just making conversation." "Hazel, God, you are so paranoid. I was bored. And Mom? Was she bored too?" Brenna froze. Her eyes shifted to the left, then back to me. "What are you talking about?" Maris Holt saw her. "Brenna, Mom was in the lobby this morning trying to find a way up. Did you tell her I was at work? Did you tell her to come?" "No." Brenna stood up. "I swear. Hazel, I did not call her. She must have just sensed it. You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was wearing one of my cashmere sweaters. She looked too comfortable, too settled. I walked over to the door where the mail slot was. I had not checked it since yesterday. I bent down and picked up the small pile of letters on the floor. A utility bill, a flyer for a dry cleaner, and a plain white envelope. There was no stamp. It had not been mailed. It had been slid under the door. I turned the envelope over. My name was not on it. It was blank. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, but familiar. It was not my mother's script, which was looping and decorative. It was not my father's, which was blocky in all caps. I read the words, "Family should live together again. Do not make this difficult." There was no signature. I looked up at Brenna. She was watching me. her expression unreadable. "What is it?" she asked. I handed her the note. She took it, read it, and frowned. "That is weird. Who is it from?" I stared at her, trying to find a lie in her face, but she just looked confused. "I do not know," I said, taking the note back. "But whoever it is, they were outside this door, and they did not use the elevator." I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The glass felt thinner tonight. The height felt less like a fortress and more like a trap. My parents were not just intrusive. They were mobilizing, and they had sent a vanguard. I turned back to Brenna. "Pack your things." "What?" She looked shocked. "You said 2 weeks. I said 2 weeks if you followed the rules. The rules were no drama and no parents. We have both in the first 24 hours. Hazel, please, I have nowhere to go. I am not kicking you out tonight," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I was trying to suppress. "But tomorrow, we are finding you a motel, and I'm changing the codes to the elevator." I walked into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the note. Family should live together again. It was not a suggestion. It was a threat. And as I looked at the jagged handwriting again, I realized why it felt familiar. It looked like the handwriting of someone trying to disguise their own hand. It looked like the handwriting of someone who knew exactly which buttons to push to make me afraid. I picked up my phone and texted Elias. "I need a lawyer, not for a contract, for a restraining order." Then I sat in the dark, in my $2.5 million penthouse, and waited for the morning, knowing that the war I had moved here to escape had just followed me up 33 flights of stairs. The neon sign of the Briar Glen Motor Inn flickered with a rhythmic, electric buzz that sounded like a dying insect. It was the only light on the service road, a stark contrast to the warm, candle-lit windows of the house I had just been expelled from. I parked my sedan in front of room 12, the tires crunching on gravel that had not been raked in a decade. Maisie was asleep in the booster seat, her head lolling against the window, clutching the handmade ornament that had sparked the explosion. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. My hands were shaking. I placed them flat against the steering wheel and breathed in for a count of 4. Out for a count of 4, I had to be calm. I had to be the wall that the chaos broke against, not the chaos itself. I woke Maisie gently. "We are having an adventure," I whispered, unbuckling her seatbelt. "We are going to have a slumber party." She rubbed her eyes, disoriented but trusting. "Is Grandma coming?" "No. Sweetie, just us. Grandma and Grandpa are tired." We checked into the room. It smelled of lemon polish and stale cigarettes masked by air freshener. The carpet was a kaleidoscope of brown and orange, durable and ugly, but the lock on the door was heavy, and the deadbolt slid home with a solid, reassuring thunk. I created a routine out of thin air. I turned on the heating unit, found a cartoon channel on the small television, and made hot cocoa using the packet from the lobby and tap water run until it was lukewarm. I sat Maisie on the bed and tucked the duvet around her. "You watch this," I said. "I have some homework to do." While Maisie watched a coyote chase a roadrunner, I sat at the small laminate desk and opened the envelope the deputy had handed me. My name was typed across the top in bold, black letters. Vivian Louise Henderson. I began to read. The language was dense, a thicket of legalese involving statutes, clauses, and definitions. But the core of it was clear enough to make my breath hitch. It was not a lawsuit. It was a notification. My grandmother, Eleanor Henderson, who had passed away 6 months ago, had left a trust, and she had not left it to her son, my father Harold. She had not left it to her daughter-in-law. My mother Marlene, she had left it to me. I read the line 3 times to be sure. Successor trustee, Vivian Louise Henderson. I sat back in the hard plastic chair. My grandmother had been a quiet woman, often overshadowed by Harold's loud opinions and Marlene's social maneuvering. We had baked bread together. We had gardened. She had never spoken to me about money. She had never spoken to me about power. Yet here, in black ink, She had handed me the keys to the kingdom my parents thought they ruled. I barely slept. Every time headlights swept across the curtain, I tensed, expecting my father's truck to roar into the parking lot. But the night passed in silence. The next morning, I dressed Maisie in the spare clothes I kept in the trunk and drove to the address listed on the courier's slip. It was a small brick building downtown, sandwiched between a bakery and a dry cleaner. The brass plaque by the door read Hawthorne and Pyle, attorneys at law. Graham Pyle was younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with a hairline that was retreating in defeat and eyes that darted toward the window every time a car passed. He looked like a man who expected a rock to come through the glass at any moment. "Ms. Henderson," he said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was damp. "I'm glad you came so quickly." He ushered us into his office and offered Maisie a coloring book and a cup of crayons at a small table in the corner. Then he closed the door and locked it. I sat across from his desk. "Mr. Pyle," I said, "I need you to explain this to me in plain English. Why was I served with these papers 5 minutes after my parents kicked me out of their house?" Graham sighed, adjusting his glasses, because, "Ms. Henderson, the timing was not a coincidence. Your parents were informed yesterday morning that the trust had officially blocked their attempt to refinance the family property. They knew you were the trustee. They knew you were the only one who could sign off on the loan." "Refinance?" I asked. "That house is paid off. Grandma paid it off 20 years ago. It was," Graham said. He opened a file folder and slid a document across the desk. It was stamped with red letters. "Emergency memorandum. 6 months ago, right after your grandmother passed, your father attempted to secure a line of credit against the equity of the estate." Graham explained, $150,000. He claimed it was for home improvements. The bank was ready to approve it. But the deed is held in the Eleanor Henderson Revocable Trust, which became irrevocable the moment she died. "And I am the trustee," I said, the reality settling on me like a coat made of lead. "You are," Graham said, "and there is more. Look at Clause 7b. I looked where he pointed. "If the successor trustee remains in their role for a period of 6 months without abdication, 20% of the trust principal shall be segregated into an educational support fund for the benefit of any great-grandchildren of the grantor." I looked over at Maisie, who was carefully coloring a picture of a horse. "Educational support," I whispered. "Your grandmother wanted to ensure your daughter had a future." Graham said softly, "But here's the catch. Your parents cannot touch the equity in the house unless you sign a waiver. They need you to dissolve the trust's hold on the property or step down as trustee so they can appoint someone else. Someone who will sign." I looked at the emergency memorandum again. The date was from last week. Someone had tried to push the loan through again. And the trust officer at the bank, Graham, presumably, had blocked it. They kicked me out because I blocked them. I said, realizing the cruelty of the timing. They invited me to Christmas dinner to butter me up, and when I did not play the part of the submissive daughter, they realized I would never sign the papers. Graham nodded slowly. "They are desperate. Ms. Henderson. People do irrational things when they are desperate for money. You need to be very careful. This is not just a family squabble anymore. This is a legal standoff involving significant assets." My phone vibrated in my purse. I ignored it. "What do I do?" I asked. "You have 72 hours to formally accept the trusteeship and file the signature cards at Northridge Bank," Graham said. "If you do not, the court can appoint a temporary trustee, and given your parents' standing in this town, that temporary trustee will likely be a friend of theirs." I stood up. "I will go to the bank." As I walked back to the car, my phone vibrated again, then again. I buckled Maisie in and sat in the driver's seat. I looked at the screen. 5 missed calls, 3 from home. 2 from Marlene Mobile. The phone rang again in my hand. I answered it. "Vivian?" It was my father. His voice was a low rumble, the sound of a storm just before it breaks. "Hello, Dad? Where are you?" he demanded. "You need to come back here. Now. We need to fix what you started." "What I started?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. You told me to leave and never return. Do not play word games with me. Girl, he snapped. You know exactly what is happening. You think you can steal this house from us? From your mother? After everything we sacrificed for you? I am not stealing anything. I said, I am following Grandma's will. There was a rustling sound, and then my mother's voice came on the line. It was terrifyingly calm, smooth and cool like the surface of a frozen lake. Vivian, she said, listen to me. Your father is upset. We are all upset. This is a misunderstanding. Is it? I asked. You do not understand the complexity of the finances. Vivian, you never have. You are a mother now. You understand that sometimes you have to move things around to keep the family afloat. We need you to sign a waiver. Just a formality that lets you mortgage the house? I asked. A formality that saves us, Marlene said, her voice dropping an octave. If you do not sign that waiver, Vivian, you are going to hurt everyone. You are going to hurt your sister. You are going to hurt the family reputation. Do you really want to be the reason we lose everything? I looked in the rearview mirror at Maisie. She was looking out the window, singing a quiet song to herself. I need to go, I said. Vivian, Marlene said, and the ice in her voice cracked, revealing a sharp, jagged edge. Do not make us fight you. You know you cannot win against us in this town. I hung up. I needed to think. But more importantly, I needed Maisie's bunny. In the haste of our departure last night, we had left her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hops, on the guest bed. She had not asked for it yet, but tonight, when the reality of the motel set in, she would need it. I drove back to the house. It was midday. The driveway was empty. My father's truck was gone, likely at the hardware store he frequented, and my mother's sedan was missing. Only Kelsey's car was in the driveway. I parked on the street, not wanting to risk being blocked in. Wait here, sweetie. I told Maisie, I'm just going to run in and get Mr. Hops. I will be right back. I walked up the front path. The festive wreath was still on the door, mocking me with its cheer. I used my key. I had not given it back, and let myself in. The house was silent. The smell of pine needles and cinnamon hung in the air, the scent of the holiday I had been exiled from. I walked quickly to the guest room and grabbed the rabbit. As I turned to leave, I passed the open door to the garage. I stopped. The garage, usually a pristine showroom for my father's tools, was a disaster zone. There were stacks of cardboard boxes everywhere. Brown packing tape was spooled on the workbench. The boxes were labeled in marker. Kitchen, master bed, linens. They were not just refinancing, they were packing. They were preparing to sell the house the moment the loan went through. Or perhaps they had already sold it and were just waiting for the title to clear. I heard a voice from the kitchen. I crept down the hallway, clutching the rabbit to my chest. We do not have a choice. Todd, it was Kelsey, my younger sister. She was 28, married to a man who sold insurance, and desperate for our parents' approval in a way that made her pliable. I cannot tell her, Kelsey whispered. If I tell her, Mom will cut us off. You know she pays for the preschool. You know she pays for the car. I stepped into the kitchen. Kelsey jumped, dropping her phone on the counter. Vivian, she gasped, her hand flying to her throat. You are not supposed to be here. Mom said you were gone. I looked at her. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not hide. Why are there boxes in the garage? Kelsey? I asked. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. They are just cleaning out, organizing. Liars pack boxes labeled kitchen. Kelsey? People who are moving pack boxes labeled kitchen. She crumbled. It was instantaneous. She sank onto one of the bar stools and buried her face in her hands. It is complicated. Viv, tell me, I said, stepping closer. Dad has a deadline, she sobbed. It is a debt, a big one. Not to the bank, to private people. He borrowed money 3 years ago for that investment in the strip mall that never happened. It is due. Viv, all of it. And the house? They have to sell it. They have a buyer lined up. Some group called Hollis Vale, but they cannot sell it while the trust holds the deed. I felt a cold chill. They were going to sell the house out from under the trust, take the cash, and pay off a loan I knew nothing about, and the trust, Maisie's future, would be gone. And Mom? I asked. She knows? Kelsey looked up, her eyes red. Mom is the one fixing it. She's been going to that charity place, the Briar Glen Community Giving Circle. She goes there 3 times a week. She says she's volunteering, but she brings home envelopes, Viv, thick ones, and then Dad takes them to the bank. I stared at her. The Community Giving Circle was a pillar of the town, a nonprofit that helped families in need. My mother had been on the board for years. Why would she bring money from a charity? I asked. I do not know, Kelsey whispered. I just know that she told me if I said anything to you, she would stop paying for Leo's school. Please, Viv, just sign the waiver. Just let them sell it. If they do not pay this debt. Kelsey stopped, her eyes wide with genuine fear. I do not know what will happen to Dad. I gripped the rabbit tighter. I cannot sign it. Kels, it belongs to Maisie now. Kelsey looked at me with a mixture of pity and resentment. Then you are going to destroy us all. I left her sitting in the kitchen and walked out the back door. I needed fresh air. I crossed the backyard, stepping over the frost-covered grass toward the fence that separated our property from the neighbors. Mrs. Delaney was there, hacking at a rosebush with a pair of shears. She was 80 years old, bent like a willow branch, but her eyes were sharp as glass. She had lived next to my grandmother for 40 years. She saw me and stopped clipping. She did not smile. She simply beckoned me over with a crooked finger. I walked to the fence. Mrs. Delaney, I said. She reached into the pocket of her oversized gardening apron and pulled out a tin. It was an old Christmas cookie tin, red with gold snowflakes, the paint chipped at the corners. Your grandmother gave me this, Mrs. Delaney said, her voice raspy. About a week before she died, she told me to keep it in my pantry. She said, if they ever throw Vivian out again, you give this to her. My throat tightened. Again? She knew. Mrs. Delaney said, she knew they would turn on you eventually. She said you were the only one with a conscience, and that is a dangerous thing to have in that house. I took the tin. It was light. Thank you, I said. She leaned over the fence, her voice dropping to a whisper. Watch your back, girl. Your mother wears a mask. But masks slip. I hurried back to the car, threw the rabbit into the back seat to a cheering Maisie, and drove 3 blocks away before I pulled over to open the tin. Inside, there were no cookies. There was a single, silver key with the number 402 stamped on it, and a note written on a piece of stationery that smelled faintly of lavender. Trust your instincts. The truth is in the papers. I knew that smell. It was my grandmother's perfume. I checked the time. It was 1 o'clock. The bank closed at 4. We drove to Northridge Bank. It was a fortress of limestone and glass in the center of town. I held Maisie's hand as we walked into the lobby. The air was cool and smelled of money. I asked for the safe deposit boxes. The clerk, a woman I vaguely recognized from high school, looked at my ID and then at the key. Box 402, she said. I will take you back. The vault was silent. A tomb for secrets. The clerk unlocked the box, slid it out, and carried it to a private viewing room. She left us alone. I opened the lid. It was not full of cash or jewelry. It was full of paper. There were photocopies of property records dating back 30 years. There was a ledger, a black notebook with my grandmother's neat, cursive handwriting filling the pages, and there was a thick, sealed envelope addressed to Vivian. I opened the ledger first. It was a log of donations. January 12th, $5,000 to Briar Glen Community Giving Circle. February 14th, $5,000 to Briar Glen Community Giving Circle. March 20th, $10,000 to Briar Glen Community Giving Circle. The list went on for years. The totals were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all flowing from my grandmother's accounts to the charity my mother worked with. But next to each entry, my grandmother had written notes in red ink. Did not authorize. Signature forged. Harold claims tax write-off. Where's the receipt? I felt sick. My parents had not just been asking for money. They had been draining her accounts for years, using the charity as a funnel. I picked up the sealed letter. My hands were trembling so badly I almost tore the paper inside. I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, written near the end of her life. My dearest Vivian, if you are reading this, I am gone, and they have shown you their true faces. I am sorry I did not protect you sooner. I was afraid of the scandal, afraid of what it would do to the family name. That was my sin. Pride. But you must know the truth. For the last 5 years, I have suspected that your mother and father have been using my accounts to cover their debts. They use the giving circle. They make me sign checks for good causes, but the money does not stay there. It moves. I have tried to trace it, but I am old and tired. They think I am senile. They think I do not see them practicing my signature on the backs of envelopes, but I see. You are the trustee because you are the only one who has never asked me for a dime. You are the only one who loved me, not what I could give you. Do not sign the house over to them. If you do, the evidence of their theft will disappear with it. The house is not just a building. Vivian, it is the vault where they keep their lies. Protect Maisie, protect yourself, and forgive an old woman for leaving you a war instead of a legacy. Love. Grandma. I sat in the small, windowless room, the letter shaking in my hand. I looked at Maisie, who was stacking the property deeds like building blocks. My parents were not just bad with money, they were criminals. They had been stealing from my grandmother for years, and now they were trying to sell the evidence to a developer called Hollis Vale. I put the papers back in the box, keeping only the letter and the ledger. I tucked them into my purse next to the trust documents. I stood up. Come on. Maisie, I said, where are we going? Mommy? We are going to find a woman named Lena Morrows, I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. I did not know who Lena Morrows was yet. I had only seen her name on a business card stapled to the back of the ledger with the note Forensic Accounting scrawled on it. But I knew she was the next step. I walked out of the bank into the cold winter sunlight. The town looked the same as it had an hour ago. The quaint shops, the holiday decorations, the polite people walking their dogs. But the veneer had cracked. I saw the rot underneath. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was a witness, and I was about to become a prosecutor. The office of Lena Morrows was located in a converted warehouse on the industrial side of Briar Glen, a part of town my parents pretended did not exist. The sign on the frosted glass door simply read, L. Morrows, Forensic Accounting, inside. The air smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. There were no plush chairs, no soothing art on the walls, and definitely no holiday decorations. It was a room designed for disassembling lies. Lena herself was a woman made of sharp angles and sharper eyes. She sat behind a desk cluttered with monitors, tapping a pen against a stack of spreadsheets. She had listened to my story without interrupting, her expression unreadable until I finished explaining the trust, the boxes in the garage, and the letter from my grandmother. She stopped tapping the pen. Your grandmother built you a fortress. Vivian, Lena said, her voice raspy, like she smoked too much or talked too little. This trust is ironclad. It is a revocable trust that calcified the moment she died. The assets are locked down. You are the gatekeeper. I felt a wash of relief. But Lena held up a hand. Do not get comfortable. A fortress is only as strong as the person holding the key. They cannot break the trust legally. So they are going to try to break you. Break me? I asked. They need to prove you are unfit. Lena said, they do not need to prove you are a bad mother. That is family court stuff. For a trust, they need to prove financial irresponsibility, instability, recklessness. If they can paint a picture of you as someone who is mentally erratic or compromised, they can petition a judge to remove you and appoint a successor. And I am guessing your parents have plenty of friends who would love to be that successor. I thought of the holiday card on the mantel. Final reminder. They are already telling people I am unstable. I said, then we need to be faster than them. Lena said. She pulled the ledger I had given her toward the center of the desk. I am going to tear these accounts apart. I need you to stay boring. Vivian, do not buy anything expensive. Do not get into public screaming matches. Do not give them a single pixel of a picture they can use. I left her office with a mandate. Be boring. Be stable. Be the rock my parents claimed I wasn't. My first act of stability was for Maisie. Living in a motel room was an adventure for 2 days, but by day 3, it would become a trauma. I needed to insulate her from the friction of my life. I drove to the Briar Glen Recreation Center. It was a sprawling brick building near the park. Smelling of chlorine and floor wax, I signed Maisie up for the Winter Wonderland Day Camp, a 2-week program for kids on holiday break. It cost $300, which I paid for with my debit card, wincing at the dwindling balance but knowing it was necessary. When I dropped her off the next morning, she clung to my leg for a moment. "Is Grandma going to be here?" she asked, looking around at the other parents. "No, sweetie," I said, kneeling to look her in the eye. "Grandma is busy. This is just for you. You are going to make crafts and play dodgeball and have hot cocoa. Will you come back?" "Always." I said, "I will be here at 4 o'clock exactly," watching her run off toward a group of kids making snowflakes out of paper. I felt a fierce, protective heat in my chest. My parents used family as a weapon. I would use it as a shield. I would make sure Maisie remembered this Christmas not as the year we were kicked out, but as the year she made 10 different kinds of snowflakes, with Maisie safe. I went to work, or rather, I went to war, armed with a notepad and a sense of dread. My phone rang at noon. It was Lena. "I found the leak," she said without preamble. That was fast. "Money leaves a trail. Vivian, even dirty money, especially dirty money, because people get sloppy when they think no one is looking. I cross-referenced the donations in your grandmother's ledger with the public tax filings of the Briar Glen Community Giving Circle. And it is a washing machine," Lena said. "Your grandmother writes a check for $5,000 to the Giving Circle. The Giving Circle logs it as a general donation. 2 days later, the Giving Circle pays an invoice for $4,800 to a vendor called Everpine Consulting for quote-unquote strategic planning services." "Who is Everpine Consulting?" I asked, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the library, the only place I could find free Wi-Fi. I pulled their corporate registration. Lena said, "It is a shell. The registered agent is a P.O. box in Nevada. But the bank account for Everpine? It is at Northridge Bank. And I am willing to bet my license that if we subpoena those records, we will find transfers going right back to an account controlled by Harold Henderson. My father. They take a cut," Lena said. "The charity keeps maybe $200 as a handling fee, and the rest goes back to your dad, clean as a whistle. It looks like a business expense reimbursement. It is tax fraud, charity fraud, and embezzlement, all wrapped up in a nice little bow." I leaned my head back against the headrest. They were stealing from his own mother to pay himself. "Why?" I asked. "Why the circle? Why not just take the money?" "Because of the optics," Lena said. "Your parents care about how they look. If Harold takes money from his mother, he is a leech. If Harold gets paid for consulting by a charity, he is a businessman, and the charity gets to boast about high donation numbers. Everyone wins, except your grandmother." I felt a wave of nausea. It was so calculated. It was so mundane. "Keep digging," I said. "I need proof that links Everpine to Harold directly." "I am on it," Lena said. "Oh, and Vivian? Watch your back. If I can find this in 4 hours. They know it is there. And they know you have the ledger." I hung up and stared at the library. It was a place of quiet, of rules. My life felt like it was spinning off its axis. But the world kept turning. I needed to secure the trust. I drove to Northridge Bank to meet with Ruth Ivers. The compliance officer Graham Pyle had recommended. Ruth was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a suit that looked like armor. She met me in a glass-walled conference room that felt like a fishbowl. "Ms. Henderson," Ruth said, sliding a folder across the table. "I have accepted your signature cards. You are officially the sole trustee on record." "Thank you," I said. "I want to freeze everything. No withdrawals, no transfers, No access for anyone but me. Done, Ruth said. But I have to tell you something. I cannot give you specifics due to privacy laws regarding the other parties. But there was an attempted transaction 3 days ago. A wire transfer request from the trust account to an external entity. Everpine Consulting? I guessed. Ruth's eyes flickered, but she did not confirm it. She simply continued. The system flagged it because the trust had just become irrevocable. But here is the concerning part. Yesterday, our call center received an inquiry. From whom? The caller identified herself as Vivian Henderson. I froze. I did not call you yesterday. We know. Ruth said, the security questions were answered correctly. Mother's maiden name, first pet, high school mascot, but the voice biometric failed, and the caller asked specific questions about how to expedite a change of trustee due to medical incapacitation. Medical incapacitation. I repeated. They are trying to say I am crazy. They wanted the forms. Ruth said. We did not send them, but Ms. Henderson, whoever called had a lot of your personal information. You should consider putting a lock on your personal credit, not just the trust. I left the bank feeling exposed. My identity, my name, my history. It was all being weaponized, and the person doing it was likely the woman who had taught me how to write my name in the first place. I needed groceries. It was a simple task. But in Briar Glen, nothing was simple. The supermarket was the town square. As I pushed my cart down the cereal aisle, I felt the eyes. 2 women from my mother's garden club were standing near the granola. They stopped talking the moment they saw me. They did not wave. They did not smile. They just watched. I turned the corner and nearly collided with Mrs. Gable, the choir director at the church. Oh, Mrs. Gable jumped back, clutching her purse. Vivian. Hello, Mrs. Gable. We were so sorry to hear the news, she said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper that felt like a slap. What news? I asked, gripping the handle of the cart. About your struggles, she said, gesturing vaguely to her head. Marlene told us at prayer group. She asked us to pray for your mental healing. She said the stress of single motherhood finally just broke you. I felt the old reflex, the one drilled into me since birth, the urge to apologize, to smooth it over, to say, yes, it has been hard, but I am trying, to protect my mother's lie because exposing it would be rude. I took a breath. The air in the store was cold. My mother is mistaken. Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice clear and loud enough for the garden club ladies to hear. I am not having a breakdown. I uncovered financial fraud in the family accounts, and my parents kicked me out because I refused to participate in it. Mrs. Gable's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked as if I had just slapped her. I hope you have a lovely Christmas, I said. I walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had never done that. I had never spoken against the script. It was terrifying, and it was exhilarating. That night, back in the motel room, after Maisie had fallen asleep clutching Mr. Hops, I opened the tin box again. I took out the ledger. I needed to understand everything. I traced the lines of my grandmother's handwriting. The donations to the giving circle were the bulk of it. But there was something else, a recurring line item that appeared once a year. Every June 14th, V.H. Renewal, $500. It started when I was 16. It continued until the year my grandmother died. V.H. Vivian Henderson, renewal. What was being renewed? A subscription? A membership? I looked at the payee. It wasn't the giving circle. It was simply written as W.S. I searched through the stack of old canceled checks my grandmother had saved in the box. I found one from 4 years ago. The check was made out to Renfield Family Record Services. I pulled out my laptop and searched for the name. It was a records management company in a town 2 hours away. Their website said they specialized in vital statistics, adoption records, and legal archiving. I looked at the dates again. June 14th, every year. I thought back to my childhood. June was always when we went on our summer vacation, but not every year. I remembered one year, when I was 16. My mother took me on a girls' trip to Renfield. She said we were going shopping. We stayed in a hotel. I remembered sitting in the lobby while she went to an appointment she said was for spa treatments. I checked the time. It was late, but the website listed a 24-hour automated line. I called it, "Thank you for calling Renfield Family Records," the robotic voice said. I navigated the menu until I got to the option for file status check. I entered the file number written in the memo line of the check. File 3920 is currently active. Status, sealed by request of guardian. Last update, June 14th. Previous year. Sealed. Why would I have a file with a record service? I was born in Briar Glen. My birth certificate was in the safe at my parents' house. Or at least, I thought it was. The mystery of VH, renewal gnawed at me. It wasn't about money. $500 a year was nothing compared to the fraud with the charity. This was about me, about who I was. My phone buzzed. A text from Kelsey. "Meet me at the Galaxy Diner. Now. Please, do not tell Mom." I looked at Maisie. I couldn't leave her alone. But I couldn't miss this. I called the front desk. The night manager, a kindly older woman named Betty, had taken a shine to Maisie. "Betty," I said, "I have a family emergency. Can you sit in my room for an hour? Maisie is asleep. I will pay you." "Honey, you save your money." Betty said, "I will bring my knitting." 20 minutes later, I walked into the Galaxy Diner. It was a chrome and neon relic that served bad coffee and great pie. Kelsey was sitting in a booth in the back, huddled over a mug of tea. She was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up, like she was hiding from the paparazzi. I slid into the booth opposite her. "You look terrible." "Kels." She looked up. Her face was blotchy. "Viv, you have to stop." "Stop what?" I asked. "Stop trying to keep a roof over my daughter's head. Stop pushing them." She hissed, "Dad is losing it. He is screaming at everyone. He threw a plate at the wall tonight because the news mentioned interest rates. And Mom? Mom is scary quiet. She is rewriting history. Viv, she is telling everyone you have always been the problem child. She is digging up stuff from when you were a teenager. The time you crashed the car. The time you failed math. She is building a case. Let her build it." I said, "I have the ledger." "Kelsey, I know about Everpine." Kelsey flinched. "You know? I know Dad is laundering money through the charity. I know Mom is helping him. It is not for them." Kelsey whispered furiously. "Do you think they are buying yachts? They are paying interest. Viv. Just interest. On what? On everything." Kelsey leaned across the table. "Dad has been broke for 10 years. The business failed a decade ago. But he could not let anyone know. He could not be the guy who failed. So he borrowed, and then he borrowed to pay the interest on the borrowing. And Mom. She could not stand the idea of being poor. She could not stand the shame. So she fixed it. She forged the documents. She charmed the bankers. She moved the money around so fast no one could see the holes. I sat back. It was a house of cards, a pyramid scheme where the only investors were my grandmother and my future. "They are drowning," Kelsey said, tears sliding down her face. "And they are using the house as a life raft. If you do not let them sell it, they go under. And they will take me with them." "Why you?" I asked gently. "Because my name is on the Everpine corporate papers," she sobbed. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Kelsey, you signed them? Mom said it was just for tax purposes. She said it was to help the family." I did not know what it was. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Listen to me," I said. "You are going to be okay. But you have to stop helping them. Right now." "I cannot," she whispered. "They own me. Viv. They watch everything I do." I left the diner with a heavy heart. My parents had not just stolen money. They had stolen my sister's autonomy. They had made her an accomplice to her own destruction. I drove back to the motel, the neon lights of the town blurring in the mist. I did not want revenge. I did not want to see them in handcuffs. I just wanted to be free. And I wanted Maisie to be safe. I decided to offer them a lifeline. A way out that didn't involve prison or ruin, but required the one thing they hated most: the truth. I spent the next morning drafting a proposal with Graham Pyle. It was generous, far more generous than they deserved. The proposal: 1. The trust retains ownership of the house. 2. Vivian Henderson remains trustee. 3. The trust will issue a zero-interest loan to Harold Henderson to pay off the immediate private debt, secured against his future earnings, not the house. 4. Harold and Marlene must resign from the board of the Giving Circle immediately. 5. A full audit of the trust accounts will be conducted, and a repayment plan for the misappropriated funds will be established. 6. No public disclosure of the fraud will be made if these terms are met. It was a path to redemption. It allowed them to save face in public while stripping them of the power to do more harm in private. I sent it via courier at noon. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Vivian. It was my father. He wasn't yelling, he was laughing, a dry, humorless sound. "You think you can dictate terms to me?" he asked. "In my own house? It is not your house. Dad, it is the trust's house, and this is the only way you stay out of legal trouble." "Legal trouble?" he spat. "I am the law in this house. You ungrateful little—" I heard a scuffle, and then my mother's voice took over. Vivian. Her voice was different today. It wasn't the sweet, manipulative tone she used on the neighbors, and it wasn't the icy, controlled tone she used when she was angry. It was flat, dead. "We received your joke of a proposal," she said. "It is not a joke, Mom. It is a way out. We do not need a way out," she said. "We need you to do as you are told. I am done doing as I am told." "Are you?" She paused. "You think you are so smart, holding that ledger. You think you have all the cards, but you forget who dealt the hand. Vivian, I do not know what you mean. You were never meant to hold power in this family," she said. "And it is not just because you are a woman, it is because you are separate." "Separate?" "You will find out soon enough," she said. "We rejected your proposal, and we are filing for your removal tomorrow morning. We are going to expose you. Vivian, we are going to tell the court everything." "Everything about what? The fraud?" "No," she said softly. "Everything about you." The line went dead. I lowered the phone, a cold dread seeping into my bones. You were never meant to hold power. It wasn't an insult. It sounded like a statement of fact, like a rule of physics I had unknowingly broken. I looked at the tin box on the dresser, the VH renewal, the sealed files, the vacations that weren't vacations. My mother wasn't just hiding money. She was hiding me. And whatever she was holding back, she was ready to use it as a weapon to destroy me. I picked up Maisie from the rec center at 4 o'clock. She ran to me, holding a paper snowflake covered in glitter. "Look, Mommy, it's perfect." "It is, baby," I said, hugging her tight, burying my face in her hair. "It is perfect." I held her, knowing that the storm had just upgraded to a hurricane. My parents had rejected the olive branch. Now, they were coming for the tree itself, and I had to be ready to stand when the wind hit. The second courier arrived at the motel door at 7 o'clock in the morning. He did not knock with the hesitation of a man delivering bad news. He knocked with the rhythmic, hollow thud of authority. I opened the door in my pajamas, shielding Maisie's eyes from the harsh winter light spilling in from the parking lot. "You have been served," he said, handing me a thick envelope that felt identical to the first one, yet infinitely heavier. I took it inside and sat on the edge of the unmade bed. The header on the legal filing was bold and aggressive: "Motion for removal of trustee and appointment of temporary successor." I scanned the paragraphs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The language was not just legal, it was personal. My parents, Harold and Marlene Henderson, were not claiming I had stolen money. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to manage it. The respondent, Vivian Louise Henderson, has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior, estrangement from family support systems, and susceptibility to undue influence by third parties acting against the interests of the trust. Undue influence. They were painting me as a puppet. They were suggesting that my refusal to let them loot the estate was not my own decision, but the result of someone whispering in my ear. They were stripping me of my agency in the court record, just as they had tried to strip me of it at the dinner table. I called Graham Pyle immediately. "They are trying to break me," I said into the phone, watching Maisie brush her teeth in the bathroom mirror. "They are trying to overwhelm you," Graham corrected, his voice calm and steady. "This is a standard tactic. Vivian. It is called paper terrorism. They bury you in filings, so you give up just to make it stop. I am not giving up." "Good," Graham said, "because we are going to file a counter-motion. We are going to seek an emergency injunction. We are going to freeze that house so hard that not even a light bulb can be changed without a judge's permission." We met at his office an hour later. I brought Maisie. Settling her in the corner with her coloring books and a pair of headphones, Graham laid out the strategy. "We need to show the court that the undue influence is actually coming from them." Graham said, "We need to show that they are the ones pressuring you to violate the terms of the trust. I have the ledger." I said, "I have the proof of the fraud." "That is good for the criminal side," Graham said. "But for the civil side, for the removal hearing, we need to prove character. We need to prove that their public image is a lie." That afternoon, I received a phone call from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, fearing it was another lawyer or a reporter, but something made me answer. "Vivian?" The voice was deep, resonant, and familiar. It was Pastor Eli Corwin. He had baptized me. He had confirmed me. He had presided over the funerals of half the people I knew in Briar Glen. "Pastor Eli," I said, surprised. "I heard you are back in town," he said, "and I heard there is trouble. You could say that. I would like to speak with you. Vivian, privately. Can you meet me at the parsonage?" I drove to the church with a knot in my stomach. My parents were pillars of this congregation. My mother arranged the flowers. My father ushered every Sunday, if the pastor was calling me. I assumed it was to deliver a lecture on honoring thy father and mother. The parsonage was a drafty Victorian house next to the sanctuary. Pastor Eli met me at the door. He was a man in his 60s, with a face worn by the burdens of other people's sins. He led me into his study, which smelled of old paper and lemon tea. He did not offer me a lecture. He offered me a cookie. "Vivian," he began, sitting in his leather armchair, "I have been wrestling with something for a long time. When I heard that you were asking questions about the community giving circle, my conscience gave me no peace." "You know about the circle?" I asked. "I know that your mother and father are very active in it," he said, "and I know that 3 years ago, your father ran a fundraising drive for the church roof. He raised $40,000. It was a miracle." I nodded. I remembered them boasting about it. "The money came through the giving circle," Eli said. He poured a donation into the circle, and the circle wrote a check to the church. But 6 months later, the contractor we hired, a man your father recommended, claimed the costs had doubled. He refunded the money to the donor, which was the circle, so the circle could reissue it. "And did they?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Eli looked down at his hands. "No, the money never came back to the church. The roof was patched, not replaced. When I asked your father, he said there were administrative complications. He said the money was being held in escrow. But Vivian, I saw the contractor driving a new truck a week later, and I saw your father pay off his own truck the week after that." I sat in silence. They had stolen from the church. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked gently. "Because I had no proof," Eli said, "and because your father is a deacon. To accuse him without evidence would have torn the congregation apart. But if you are going to court, if you are going to expose the truth, I cannot let you stand alone." I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the first time in days that someone from my past had looked at me and seen me, not the caricature my parents had created. "Will you testify?" I asked. Eli nodded slowly. "I will not testify to punish them. Vivian, I will testify because the community was used. Faith was used, and that is a line I cannot allow them to cross. I left the parsonage feeling lighter. I had an ally. A pillar of the town was willing to say that the Hendersons were not who they appeared to be, but the relief was short-lived. I returned to the motel to find Lena Morrows waiting in the lobby. She had her laptop open on her knees and a grim expression on her face. "We have a problem," she said as I walked in. "What is it? You know that call to the bank? The one pretending to be you?" "Yes, I traced it." Lena said, "I have a friend in cybersecurity." We pulled the IP logs from the bank's digital handshake. The call was VoIP, routed through a computer. We traced the IP address to a residential router in Briar Glen. "My parents' house?" I asked. "No," Lena said. "The account is registered to Todd Miller." I froze. Todd Miller, Kelsey's husband, my sister's husband. "That means Kelsey did it," I whispered. "Todd doesn't know my security questions. He doesn't know the name of my first pet. Kelsey does." Lena nodded. "It looks that way." I felt a crack in my heart that went deeper than the betrayal by my parents. Kelsey was my little sister. I had protected her on the playground. I had helped her with her homework. We had survived that house together. She threw me to the wolves. I said, "Or she is being fed to them." Lena said, "Be careful. Vivian, if you use this, you take her down too." I drove to Kelsey's house. It was a small, neat ranch style on the south side of town. Todd's car was gone. He worked late on Tuesdays. I knocked on the door. Kelsey answered. Holding her toddler on her hip, she looked exhausted. When she saw me, her face went pale. "Viv," she said, I can't talk right now." I walked past her into the living room. It was cluttered with toys, a stark contrast to the sterile museum of our childhood home. "Put the baby down, Kelsey," I said quietly. She put her son in his playpen and turned to face me. Her hands were shaking. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Mom said if I talk to you—" "Mom is not here," I cut in. "And Mom is not the one who committed identity fraud. You are—" Kelsey flinched as if I had struck her. "I don't know what you mean. Do not lie to me," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. "We traced the IP address. Kelsey, we know the call to the bank came from this house. We know you tried to get the trustee change forms. That is a federal crime." Kelsey burst into tears. It was a sudden, ugly sound. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "I had to," she sobbed. "They made me." "Who made you?" "Dad. He came over here. He was screaming. He said if I didn't help them, they would lose the house and it would be my fault because I didn't convince you to sign. He said they would stop paying for Leo's preschool. He said they would call Todd's boss and tell him about the trouble Todd got into last year." I sat down next to her. I didn't hug her. I couldn't. Not yet. "So you impersonated me?" I asked. "You tried to steal the trust from me?" "I didn't think it would work," Kelsey cried. "I just wanted them to stop yelling. I just wanted them to leave me alone." "Vivian, please, don't send me to jail. Please don't tell Todd." I looked at my sister. She was 28, but she looked 8. She was still the terrified little girl hiding in the closet while our father raged in the hallway. My parents had weaponized her fear. They had turned her into a criminal to cover their own crimes. "I am not going to send you to jail." I said, "But I need you to do something for me. Anything," she whispered. "I need you to write down exactly what happened. I need you to write down that Dad came here and forced you to make that call." "I can't," she said, her eyes widening. "They will kill me." "They will not kill you," I said firmly. "But if you do not do this, Kelsey, I cannot protect you when this goes to court, because it is going to court. And if the judge sees that IP log without an explanation, he will not see a victim. He will see a co-conspirator." Kelsey nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Okay, I will do it. But Viv, does it ever end? Do they ever stop?" I stood up. "I do not know, but I am stopping." I left her house with a handwritten statement in my purse. It was messy, stained with tears. but it was the truth. The next morning, my mother played her card. She called me at 8 o'clock. Her voice was soft, reasonable, the voice she used when she wanted to convince a neighbor to chair a committee. "Vivian," she said, "we need to stop this. Your father is beside himself. He is not sleeping. Then he should stop filing motions." I said, "We want to drop the motion." She said, "We want to settle this. Just the family. No lawyers." I tightened my grip on the phone. "What are you proposing?" "Meet me at the notary office on Main Street," she said. "I have drawn up a temporary agreement. It just says that we will pause all legal action for 30 days while we work out a mediation plan. That is all. It stops the bleeding. It lets us breathe." I hesitated. A pause would be good. The legal bills were mounting, and the stress was eating me alive. "Send me the document first." I said, "Vivian, honestly," she sighed, "it is 1 page. Just come read it. If you do not like it, you do not sign it, but at least give us the chance to make peace." I agreed to meet her, but I did not go alone. I texted Graham to meet me there, but to wait in his car unless I signaled him. The notary office was a small storefront with dusty blinds. My mother was waiting inside. She was wearing her best wool coat and a silk scarf. She looked impeccable. She looked like the victim. "Vivian," she said, reaching out to hug me. I stepped back. "Let me see the paper." "Mom." She stiffened, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Of course, always so businesslike." She handed me a single sheet of paper. It was titled, "Stipulation for Temporary Abeyance of Legal Proceedings." I read it. It looked standard. It said that both parties agreed to freeze litigation. It said the status quo would be maintained. But then I saw paragraph 4. "In the interest of simplifying the estate for mediation purposes, the trustee agrees to temporarily waive the beneficiary designation restrictions outlined in Clause 7B of the original trust instrument, to allow for fluid negotiation of assets." Clause 7B, the Educational Support Clause, the clause that protected Maisie. If I signed this, I wasn't just pausing the lawsuit, I was waiving Maisie's right to the money. I was unlocking the assets so they could be negotiated, which meant sold. I looked up at my mother. Her eyes were watching me, bright and predatory. "This isn't a pause," I said quietly. "This is a waiver. You are trying to trick me into signing away Maisie's inheritance. It is just temporary." "Vivian," she insisted, her voice rising, "it is just technical language to let us move money if we need to pay bills." "You think I am stupid," I said. "You think I am the same little girl who believed you when you said you were just holding my birthday money for safekeeping. Vivian, don't make a scene. I am not making a scene. Mother, I am making a decision." I tore the paper in half. Then I tore it again. I dropped the pieces on the floor between us. "Tell Dad I will see him in court." I walked out. I didn't look back, but I could feel her rage radiating like heat from a furnace. When I got to Graham's office, I was shaking. They tried to trick me. I told him. They tried to get me to sign away Maisie's rights in a notary office. Graham nodded grimly. "That is consistent with their behavior. But I have something that might cheer you up, or at least, arm you." He turned his laptop monitor toward me. "We subpoenaed the body camera footage from the deputy who served you the papers," Graham said. "The night of the Christmas dinner, I watched the screen. The video was grainy and dark. I saw the front porch of my parents' house. I saw the deputy walking up the steps. I heard the doorbell ring. The door opened. My father stood there. He looked flushed, angry. 'Deputy,' he said, 'is it done? Did she leave?' 'Yes, sir,' the deputy said. 'She is gone, but I have these papers for a Vivian Henderson.' I saw my father's face change. He looked confused. 'Papers? From Hawthorne and Pyle,' the deputy said. Then, clearly, unmistakably, the microphone picked up my father's voice. He turned his head slightly back toward the house, toward where my mother must have been standing. 'We were so close,' he muttered. Then he turned back to the deputy. 'Give them to me. I cannot—' 'Sir, personal service required.' The video ended. 'We were so close,' I repeated. They knew, Graham said. They knew the trust was about to lock them out. They knew the timeline. They kicked you out that night hoping you would be too rattled to check your mail, or that you would leave town and miss the service window. They were counting on you being weak. They were so close to stealing it all. I went back to the motel room that night feeling a strange sense of hollowness. I had the evidence. I had the ledger. I had the pastor. I had the body cam footage. I had Kelsey's confession. I was going to win. But winning felt like losing. Every piece of evidence was another confirmation that my parents did not love me. They loved the control they had over me. And now that the control was gone, there was nothing left but hatred. I sat on the floor with the tin box. I needed to feel close to the one person who had actually loved me, my grandmother. I picked up the first letter she had written. I read it again. Protect Maisie. Protect yourself. But then my eye caught a phrase I had skimmed over the first time. Just like I had to protect you when you were 16. Just like I had to renew the wall between you and them. The wall between you and them. I looked at the ledger again. V.H. Renewal. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into a terrifying pattern. The payment was to a record service, a service that specialized in sealed files. My grandmother had paid it, not my parents, my grandmother. There was a second envelope in the tin. It was smaller, tucked into the bottom lining. It was sealed with wax. I had missed it before because it was the same color as the tin's interior. I pried it open. There was a single sheet of paper inside. It was not a letter. It was a copy of a court order. State of redacted family court. In the matter of the custody of Vivian Louise Henderson, order of protection and sealing of records. I read the summary. Petitioner, Eleanor Henderson, grandmother. Respondent, name redacted. The summary detailed a legal battle from when I was 4 years old. A biological relative, a man whose name was blacked out, had petitioned for custody, not because he wanted me, but because he had discovered that my grandmother had set up a trust fund for me at birth. He wanted control of the assets. My grandmother had fought him. She had spent a fortune, and she had won. She had sealed the records to prevent him from finding me again. She had changed my legal domicile. She had created a firewall. And then I read the handwritten note at the bottom, in my grandmother's script. Vivian, your mother and father wanted to give you to him. They wanted to settle for a cash payout. They said having you was too expensive. And this man offered them $50,000 to drop their custodial claim. I refused. I bought them off instead. I paid your parents the $50,000 to keep you. That is why Marlene hates you. Not because you are bad, but because you cost her the only thing she loves. Money. I bought you, Vivian. I bought your safety, and I have paid every year to keep that file sealed, so you would never know that you were sold. The paper slipped from my fingers. I sat on the coarse motel carpet, the room spinning. I was not just their daughter. I was a transaction. My entire life. The guilt trips. The demands for gratitude. The constant refrain of, after everything we did for you, it was all a lie. They hadn't sacrificed for me. They had been paid to keep me. My grandmother had purchased my childhood from them like a piece of furniture. And Marlene didn't hate me because I was rebellious. She hated me because I represented a deal she felt she had lost. She resented that my grandmother held the purse strings. She resented that she had to pretend to be a mother to get the payout. I felt a sound rising in my throat, a keen of grief that I had to smother with my hand so I wouldn't wake Maisie. I wasn't unwanted. I was deeply, desperately wanted by my grandmother. She had saved me. She had built a fortress of paper and law to keep me safe from the wolves who shared my blood. But the grief was crushing. I mourned the parents I never had. I mourned the little girl who had tried so hard to be good, to be worthy, not knowing that her worth had already been calculated and cashed in a bank account 20 years ago. I looked at Maisie sleeping in the bed. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. I would never sell her. I would never trade her peace for comfort. I would burn the world down before I let anyone treat her like an asset. I wiped my face. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The fear was gone. You cannot fear people you no longer respect. You cannot fear people who are simply bad investments. I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling outside, covering the dirty asphalt of the parking lot in a clean white sheet. The hearing was in 2 days. I was going to walk into that courtroom. I was going to lay the ledger, the letters, and the video on the judge's bench. I was going to destroy their reputation. I was going to expose their fraud. I was going to take the house, the trust, and the truth. I would lose my family. I would be an orphan in everything but name. But as I looked at my daughter, I knew the truth. It was a bargain, and for the first time in the history of the Henderson family, it was a fair price. The discovery phase of a lawsuit is designed to be boring. It is a war of attrition fought with banker boxes and gigabytes of data, intended to bury the opposition under a mountain of paper until they suffocate. My parents' legal team, a glossy firm from the state capital, sent over 3,000 pages of documents on the first day. They expected me to drown. They did not know I had hired a woman who breathed underwater. Lena Morrows turned the conference table in Graham Pyle's office into a dissection slab. She categorized every receipt, every email, every bank transfer with the cold precision of a surgeon. For 3 days, the only sounds in the room were the hum of the heater and the rhythmic rustle of paper. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Lena stopped moving. She held up a single sheet of paper, a printout from a corporate registry database. "I found the ghost," she said. I looked up from a stack of my grandmother's old medical records they had subpoenaed, trying to prove she was senile when she signed the trust. "Who?" "Everpine Consulting," Lena said. "We knew it was a shell company, but shells have to attach to something eventually. I followed the money out the back door. The payments from the giving circle go to Everpine. Everpine holds the funds for 48 hours, then wires them to a holding account for a company called Hollis Vale Group." "Hollis Vale?" I asked. The name sounded familiar, like something I had seen on a billboard on the highway. "They are a property development firm," Graham said, leaning forward. "They specialize in distressed assets. They buy up neighborhoods that are struggling, bulldoze them, and put up mixed-use luxury condos. They are aggressive," Lena nodded, "and they are hungry." I cross-referenced Hollis Vale's recent acquisitions. In the last 6 months, they have bought 4 houses on your parents' street, all paid in cash, all above market value. I stared at the map Lena had pulled up on her screen. The red dots marked the sold houses. My parents' house sat right in the middle, the centerpiece of the block. It is not just about the debt. I realized, the pieces clicking together with a sickening sound. The house is not just a house, it is the keystone. "If they get the Henderson house, they get the whole block," Lena said. "That is the leverage. Hollis Vale needs that property to clear the zoning for a larger complex." I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling in heavy, wet clumps. "Harold's debt isn't just a mistake," I said. "It is a partnership. He promised them the house. He probably took an advance on the sale price to pay off his other loans, thinking he could force me to sign the deed over before anyone noticed. And when you blocked the refinance," Graham said, "you didn't just stop a loan. You stopped a multi-million-dollar development deal. You are the only thing standing between Hollis Vale and this town." "They are selling the neighborhood," I whispered. "My parents are selling out their neighbors, the people they have lived next to for 30 years, just to cover their own tracks." That evening, I had to pretend the world was normal. The Briar Glen Community Holiday Stroll was a mandatory event for anyone with a child under 10. The main street was closed to traffic, lined with food trucks and carolers. I bundled Maisie in her pink snowsuit and drove downtown, parking 6 blocks away to avoid being seen. We walked hand in hand through the crowd. Maisie was enchanted, her eyes wide as she looked at the twinkling lights wrapped around the lampposts. She wanted a candy cane. She wanted to pet the police horse. She wanted to see Santa. I kept my head down, pulling my scarf up to cover my face. I was not Vivian Henderson, the pariah. I was just a mother. But anonymity in a small town is a myth. We turned the corner near the town square, and there they were. A large booth was set up with a banner that read, "Briar Glen Community Giving Circle." warmth for all. My father was standing by a donation bin, wearing a Santa hat and a jovial smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was shaking hands with the mayor. My mother was beside him, handing out hot cider, looking radiant and benevolent. They looked like the perfect grandparents. They looked like the pillars of the community. I stopped, pulling Maisie back behind a group of teenagers. "Look, Mommy," Maisie pointed. "It's Grandma and Grandpa. Can we go say hi?" My stomach turned. It wasn't just anger. It was nausea. I was watching a performance. Every smile, every handshake, every cup of cider was a calculation. They were using the town's goodwill as a shield to hide the fact that they were robbing it blind. "No, sweetie," I said, my voice tight. "They are working right now. We cannot disturb them." "But Grandpa sees me." I looked up. Harold's eyes had locked onto us. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He took a step forward, then stopped as the mayor clapped him on the back. I picked Maisie up, ignoring her protests, and turned around. "We are going to get hot cocoa," I promised. The big kind with marshmallows. I walked fast, my heart pounding. I needed to get away from the lie. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kelsey. "Meet me behind the library. 10 minutes. Alone." I left Maisie with Betty, the motel manager who had become our de facto grandmother, and drove to the library. The parking lot was dark. Kelsey's car was idling in the back row. I got into the passenger seat. Kelsey didn't look at me. She was staring at the dashboard, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. "Here," she said, thrusting a small silver flash drive at me. "What is this? Just take it before I change my mind." I took the drive. "Is this from the house?" "It is from Mom's laptop," Kelsey whispered. I guessed her password. It wasn't hard. It was Briar Glen number 1. I looked at the drive, knowing it contained the ammunition I needed to destroy them. "What is on it?" "Emails," Kelsey said. Between Mom and a man named Silas at Hollis Vale Group, I felt a cold chill. So it was confirmed. "Viv," Kelsey said, turning to me, tears streaming down her face. "There is an email from last week. The subject line is obstruction removal." Obstruction removal. That was me. It says, "Once the trustee signs, we can close before New Year. The funds will be wired immediately upon recording of the deed." Kelsey wiped her face. "They are desperate. Viv. They are so desperate. In the email, Mom asks if they can get a cash advance to pay for legal fees, to pay for the lawyers they are using to sue you. They are using the developer's money to sue me so they can sell the house to the developer." I said, "It was a snake eating its own tail." Kelsey grabbed my arm. "Please, Viv, do not destroy my life. If this comes out, if Todd finds out I knew." I covered her hand with mine. "I promised you. Kelsey, if you tell the truth, I will protect you. I will tell the judge you were coerced. I will make sure the blame lands where it belongs." She nodded, sniffing. "You were always the strong one. That is why they hate you. You do not need them." I got out of the car. As I walked back to my vehicle, a shadow detached itself from the side of the library building. "Vivian." I stopped. My father stepped into the pool of yellow light from the street lamp. He looked older than he had at the festival. The Santa hat was gone. His coat hung loosely on his frame. "Dad." He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He walked toward me with a strange, pleading look on his face. "You need to stop this," he said. "You are tearing this family apart. I am not the one who sold the neighborhood to a developer. Dad, I am not the one who stole from Grandma." He flinched. "We didn't steal. We managed. That money was sitting there doing nothing. We put it to work. You put it in your pocket. I put it into keeping this family afloat," he snapped, the anger flaring up. "Do you have any idea what it costs to live in this town? To keep up the house? To make sure you and your sister had everything you needed? I had everything I needed because Grandma paid for it." I said quietly. He stopped, his mouth working silently. "I know. Dad, I know about the $50,000. I know about the custody case. I know Grandma bought me from you." His face went gray. In the harsh light, he looked like a ghost. That was complicated. He stammered, "We were young. We were broke. Your mother. She didn't know how to handle a child. So you sold me. We secured your future," he cried. "We made sure you stayed with family. And after everything we did for you, the piano lessons, the college tuition, the car, how can you stand there and hold this over us? We raised you. Vivian." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat at the head of the dinner table for 33 years, demanding respect, demanding gratitude. I realized, with a sudden, crystal clarity, that I didn't hate him. I pitied him. He was a small man who had spent his life pretending to be big. "You didn't raise me," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You housed me. You fulfilled a contract. You did what you chose to do. And now, I am choosing differently." I got in my car and locked the door. He stood there, banging his fist weakly against the window, shouting words I couldn't hear. I backed out and drove away. The next morning, I knew I had to face the other half of the equation. My father was the noise, but my mother was the architect. I sent her a text. "Meet me at the park. The bench by the duck pond. Noon. If you bring a lawyer, I leave." She was there when I arrived. She was sitting perfectly still, wearing large sunglasses and a cashmere scarf. She didn't look at the ducks. She looked at the frozen water. I sat on the other end of the bench. We didn't touch. We didn't hug. "I know about the VH renewal," I said. She didn't flinch. She didn't even turn her head. "I assumed you would find it," she said. "Eleanor was never good at throwing things away." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why did I have to find out from a piece of paper that my father wasn't sure he wanted me?" "It wasn't your father," she said coolly. "It was me." I turned to look at her. Her profile was sharp, beautiful, and hard as marble. I was 22. "Vivian, I didn't want a baby. I wanted a life. But in this town, you have a baby. You stay." Then that man showed up. Your biological father. He was trash. But he had a lawyer. He wanted money. He threatened to take you and drag our name through the mud. So Grandma paid him off. She paid us off, Marlene corrected. She told us that if we gave up our rights, she would cut us off. But if we kept you, if we raised you the way she wanted, she would support us. She bought you, Vivian, and she made me the nanny. The bitterness in her voice was acid. It wasn't recent anger. It was ancient. It had been marinating for 3 decades. She held the purse strings. Marlene continued. "Every time I wanted to go on a trip, every time I wanted to buy a new dress, I had to ask her. And she would look at me and say, 'Is Vivian taken care of?' You were the golden ticket. You were the reason we had money. And you were the reason we were trapped. So you resented me." I said, "I resented needing you," she said, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were dry behind the dark glasses. "I resented that a child held more power in my marriage than I did. Eleanor loved you more than she loved her own son, more than she tolerated me. You were her second chance, and I was just the vessel." I sat there, absorbing the cold truth. It made sense. The nitpicking, the constant criticism, the distance. She couldn't love me because I was the symbol of her indentured servitude. "And now?" I asked. "Why the fraud? Why the house?" "Because she is dead," Marlene said flatly. And I thought I was finally free. I thought I could finally sell that damn house, take the money, and live the life I should have had 30 years ago. But then she left the trust to me. I finished. "You were the final insult," Marlene said. "Even from the grave. She chose you. She gave you the power to control us one last time." She stood up, smoothing her coat. "I am not going to let you win. Vivian, I spent 30 years earning that money. It is mine." She walked away, her heels clicking on the frozen path. I watched her go. I felt a strange lightness. The mystery was gone. My mother wasn't a monster. She was a woman who had sold her soul for comfort and hated the receipt. 2 days later, we were in court for the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed. In Briar Glen, a lawsuit involving the Hendersons was better than cable television. I saw Mrs. Gable in the back row. I saw the ladies from the garden club. The judge, the Honorable Marcus Stone, was a stern man who had no patience for theatrics. He reviewed the motions in silence for 20 minutes while the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. He looked up over his reading glasses. "I have reviewed the petition for removal," Judge Stone said, "and I have reviewed the respondent's opposition." My mother's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, Ms. Henderson is unstable. She is living in a motel. She is refusing to communicate with her parents regarding the maintenance of the family estate. The assets are at risk." Graham Pyle stood up. "Your Honor, the assets are at risk because the petitioners are attempting to liquidate them for personal gain. My client is fulfilling her fiduciary duty by protecting the trust property." Judge Stone held up a hand. "I am denying the emergency motion for removal." He ruled, "There is insufficient evidence at this stage to prove the trustee is unfit. Ms. Henderson remains in control of the trust." I let out a breath I had been holding for a week. "However," the judge continued, looking at me, "this is a serious conflict. I am setting a final evidentiary hearing for January 5th, and Ms. Henderson, I am warning you. You are the fiduciary. If you mishandle 1 cent of these funds, if you use this trust as a tool for vengeance rather than protection, I will remove you and I will sanction you. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." I said, "I understood perfectly. I had to be flawless, to prove my intent." I made a move that afternoon that confused everyone but Graham. I went to the bank and executed Clause 7B. I opened a new account titled the Maisie Henderson Educational Trust. I transferred exactly 20% of the liquid cash from the main trust into this new, locked account. I set it up so that the funds could only be used for tuition, books, and educational expenses, paid directly to institutions. Then, I filed a notice with the court disclosing the transfer. I wasn't hoarding the money. I wasn't spending it on myself. I was irrevocably committing it to the next generation. I was doing exactly what my grandmother had asked. The news rippled through the town. Vivian Henderson wasn't buying a sports car. She was securing a college fund. It was a move that signaled stability. It won me quiet nods from the tellers at the bank and a thumbs up from Mrs. Delaney over the fence when I went to check the mail at the house. But my parents were not quiet. They were cornered animals. On the eve of the final hearing, I was sitting in the motel room, organizing the exhibits, the flash drive, the ledger, the body cam footage. There was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. No one was there. I opened the door. The parking lot was empty. But on the doormat, there was a plain manila envelope. I brought it inside. There was no return address. I opened it. Inside was a single document, notarized and signed. Affidavit of Sarah Jenkins. I read the first paragraph. I, Sarah Jenkins, former administrative assistant at Hollisvale Group, hereby state under oath, Sarah Jenkins. I didn't know the name, but as I read, my hands began to shake. I was instructed by my supervisor, Silas Thorne, to process documents related to the Henderson property acquisition. On December 20th, Marlene Henderson visited our office. She provided new signature pages for the purchase agreement and requested that we backdate them to November. Prior to the filing of the trust documents, she stated that this was necessary to bypass the daughter. She admitted to the backdating. Furthermore, Ms. Henderson provided a personal check to expedite the processing. I have attached a photocopy of the check. There it was. A check for $5,000, signed by Marlene Henderson, made out to Sarah Jenkins personally. I am coming forward because I was terminated for refusing to destroy these files. The affidavit concluded, this was it. It wasn't just circumstantial evidence of a plan. It was proof of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. I looked at the date on the affidavit. It had been signed 2 hours ago. Someone was watching out for me, or maybe, just maybe, my parents' cruelty had finally created too many enemies. I placed the affidavit on top of the stack of evidence, Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom and end it. I would tear down the facade of the perfect family and show the town what lay beneath. It would be ugly. It would be painful. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the wreckage. I was the one holding the wrecking ball. The Briar Glen County Courthouse was built in 1920, a structure of red brick and white pillars designed to make people feel small. On the morning of January 5th, the air inside felt thinner than usual. The benches in Judge Stone's courtroom were not empty. They were filled with the people who made up the fabric of my life. I saw the ladies from the garden club, their hats resting on their laps like sleeping birds. I saw the deacons from the church, sitting in a grim row with their arms crossed. I saw the barista from the coffee shop and the librarian who had checked out books to me when I was 6. They were not here for entertainment. They were here because the Hendersons were a benchmark in this town. If we were broken, then the standard of a good family was a lie, and everyone wanted to know if they had been measuring themselves against a fraud. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Graham Pyle. My hands were folded on the oak surface. I was wearing a navy blue suit I had bought at a thrift store 2 towns over because I refused to spend trust money on clothes. My parents sat at the defense table. My father, Harold, wore his Sunday best, but the collar of his shirt looked loose around his neck, as if he had shrunk in the last week. My mother, Marlene, was a statue. She sat with her spine perfectly straight, staring at the great seal of the state mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench. She looked like a queen waiting for a beheading. Someone else's, not hers. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Marcus Stone entered the room. He did not look at the gallery. He sat down, arranged his robe, and looked over his glasses at us. "We are here for the evidentiary hearing in the matter of the Eleanor Henderson Trust," Judge Stone said. "The motion before the court is the removal of Vivian Henderson as trustee. The burden of proof is on the petitioners." My parents' lawyer, a slick man from the Capitol named Mr. Sterling, stood up. He painted a picture of me as a vengeful, estranged daughter who was holding the family estate hostage out of spite. He used words like emotional instability and lack of financial acumen. Then it was our turn. Graham called me to the stand first. I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. I looked at the jury box, which was empty for this hearing, and then at the judge. "Ms. Henderson," Graham asked, "why did you block the refinancing of the family home?" "Because the home is the primary asset of the trust," I said, my voice steady. My grandmother's instructions were clear. The assets are to be preserved for the benefit of the beneficiaries, including my daughter, Maisie. Refinancing the home to pay off personal debts incurred by my father would have violated my fiduciary duty. Mr. Sterling tried to rattle me on cross-examination. "Miss Henderson, isn't it true you have a history of conflict with your mother?" "Yes," I said. "And isn't it true you resent them for their parenting style?" "I resent them for stealing." I said. "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Sustained," the judge said. "Stick to the facts." "Ms. Henderson, these are the facts," I said, turning to look at my mother. I found a ledger in my grandmother's safety deposit box. It details 10 years of unauthorized transfers. "I am not blocking the loan because I am angry. I am blocking the loan because the trust has already been looted." A murmur went through the gallery. Judge Stone banged his gavel once, a sharp crack that silenced the room. Graham called Lena Morrows to the stand. Lena looked out of place in the courtroom. Like a mechanic in a flower shop, she opened her laptop and connected it to the projector. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. It was a spiderweb of red lines connecting boxes. "Your Honor," Lena said, her voice raspy and precise, "this chart tracks the flow of money from the Henderson accounts." She pointed to the first box. "This is the Briar Glen Community Giving Circle," she explained, "between 2018 and 2023. Eleanor Henderson's accounts transferred over $200,000 to this charity." She pointed to the next box. "And this is Everpine Consulting. Within 48 hours of each donation, 80% of the funds were invoiced to Everpine." And here, she pointed to the final box. is where Everpine sent the money, a checking account at Northridge Bank. The signatories on that account are Harold Henderson and a holding company called AAH Ventures. The courtroom was silent. The math was simple. The money went in a circle and ended up in my father's pocket. Mr. Sterling tried to argue that these were legitimate consulting fees. For what services? Lena asked, cutting him off. Everpine has no employees, no website, no office. Unless they were consulting on how to disappear money, there were no services. Then came the hardest part. Call Kelsey Miller, Graham said. My sister stood up from the front row. She looked terrified. She walked to the stand as if she were walking to the gallows. She didn't look at our parents. She looked at me. State your name, the clerk said. Kelsey Miller, she whispered. Graham approached her gently. Mrs. Miller, are you familiar with an attempt to access the trust accounts at Northridge Bank on December 22nd? Kelsey nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Yes. Did you make a call to the bank pretending to be your sister? Vivian Henderson? Yes. Why? Because I was afraid. She sobbed. Afraid of what? Afraid of my father. Mister? Sterling jumped up. Objection. Hearsay. Overruled. The judge said, the witness may explain her state of mind. Kelsey took a breath, her chest hitching. My father came to my house. He told me that if the house wasn't sold, he would be ruined. He said it was Vivian's fault. He said I had to help them fix it or they would stop helping me with my son's tuition. He stood over me while I dialed the phone. He told me what to say. The silence in the room was heavy. This wasn't financial fraud anymore. This was abuse. And the email account? Graham asked. The one used to communicate with the bank? My husband's, Kelsey said, but Dad made us give him the password. He said it was just for paperwork. Kelsey looked at the judge. Please, Your Honor, I know I broke the law, but please don't take my son away. I just wanted them to stop yelling. Judge Stone looked at Kelsey with something approaching pity. He nodded for her to step down. Finally, the defense called their star witness, Marlene Henderson. My mother walked to the stand with her head high. She was not going to crumble like Kelsey. She sat down and smoothed her skirt. Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Sterling asked, did you coerce your daughter into making that call? Absolutely not, Marlene said, her voice cool and offended. Kelsey was trying to help. She saw how distraught her father was. Vivian has been difficult since she was a child. She has always been jealous of the attention we gave Kelsey. This lawsuit is just her way of punishing us for having rules. And the money? Sterling asked. The accusations of fraud? Marlene smiled. A thin, tight expression. Eleanor was a generous woman, but she was confused in her later years. We managed her finances to ensure her comfort. Every penny was used to maintain the estate and the family standing. Vivian doesn't understand business. She sees conspiracy where there is only management. She was good. I could feel the room shifting. People wanted to believe her. They wanted to believe that the nice lady who ran the charity drive wasn't a monster. Graham stood up for cross-examination. He didn't carry a notepad. He carried a single manila envelope. Mrs. Henderson, Graham said, you claim you were just managing the estate? Yes. And you claim you never attempted to bypass the trust's legal restrictions? Never. We respect the law. Graham opened the envelope. He pulled out the affidavit. Your Honor, I would like to introduce Exhibit D, a notarized affidavit from Sarah Jenkins, a former employee of Hollis Vale Group. Marlene's eyes flickered. It was the first crack in the porcelain. Who? She asked. Ms. Jenkins states. Graham read, walking toward the witness stand, that on December 20th, you personally visited the Hollis Vale offices and provided backdated signature pages for a purchase agreement. She also states you gave her a personal check for $5,000 to process these fraudulent documents. That is a lie, Marlene said, her voice rising. I don't know any Sarah Jenkins. Graham pulled out the photocopy of the check. Is this your signature, Mrs. Henderson? Marlene stared at the paper. Her face went pale, the rouge on her cheeks standing out like bruises. I write a lot of checks, she stammered. To property development clerks? Graham asked. For $5,000? Marlene looked at Mr. Sterling, but he was staring at his table, knowing the ship was sinking. And finally, Graham said, stepping back, we have one more piece of evidence regarding your intent, Your Honor, the body camera footage from the night of service. The bailiff dimmed the lights. The video played on the screen. The grainy image of my father on the porch. The question, did she leave? And then, the audio, amplified through the courtroom speakers. We were so close. It hung in the air. We were so close. Graham stopped the video. So close to what? Mrs. Henderson? Graham asked softly. So close to selling the house before Vivian found out? So close to burying the evidence? Marlene didn't answer. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. She looked old. She looked trapped. She looked at me. And for a second, I saw the raw hatred burning in her eyes. The hatred of a woman who had been outmaneuvered by the asset she thought she owned. No further questions, Graham said. The closing arguments were short. The judge didn't need them. Judge Stone took 10 minutes to review his notes. Then he looked up. The court finds, he said, his voice booming, that the petitioners, Harold and Marlene Henderson, have acted with gross negligence and malice against the interests of the trust. He looked at my father. Mr. Henderson, you treated this trust as a personal piggy bank. He looked at my mother. And Mrs. Henderson, you attempted to subvert the legal process through forgery and bribery. The ruling is as follows. The motion to remove Vivian Henderson is denied with prejudice. Vivian Henderson remains the sole trustee. Furthermore, the court appoints an independent receiver to audit all accounts connected to the Briar Glen Community Giving Circle and Everpine Consulting. Any findings of criminal conduct will be referred to the district attorney. He paused. Regarding the property, the house is frozen. No sale, transfer, or encumbrance may occur without the direct approval of this court. And finally, I am issuing a temporary order of protection for Kelsey Miller and her family against the petitioners. Judge Stone slammed the gavel. Court is adjourned. There was no cheering, no applause. The room was silent. People stood up slowly, looking at their feet, looking at the walls, looking anywhere but at the Hendersons. My parents sat alone at their table. They were radioactive. I walked out of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cold. I felt exhausted. A bone-deep weariness that sleep wouldn't fix. Reporters were waiting on the steps. A woman with a microphone thrust it toward me. Ms. Henderson, Ms. Henderson, are you taking your parents home? Are you evicting them? I stopped. I looked at the camera. I thought about the $50,000. I thought about the VH renewal. I thought about Maisie. I am not taking anything. I said quietly, I am keeping a promise someone made to protect my child. I walked past them, down the steps, and into the winter afternoon. That night, I went back to the house. I had the legal right. The judge had given me possession of the keys to secure the property. My parents had been granted 24 hours to vacate the premises while the receiver did his work, but they had left early. They had gone to a hotel in the next county, fleeing the shame. The house was dark. It smelled of lemon polish and silence. I walked through the rooms. The boxes in the garage were still there, taped and labeled. The ghost of the life we had pretended to live hung in the air. I went to my grandmother's old room. It was the only room in the house my mother hadn't touched. Mostly out of superstition, the bed was made. The smell of lavender was faint but present. I sat at her vanity table. I opened the top drawer. It was empty, except for a small, wooden music box. I recognized it. It had been hers since she was a girl. I wound the key on the bottom. The tinkling notes of Edelweiss began to play. The lid popped open. Inside, there was no jewelry, just a small, folded piece of paper and a micro-cassette tape. I found the old tape player in the bedside table. She had used it to listen to audiobooks. I put the tape in and pressed play. There was a hiss of static. Then, her voice. Vivian, she said, if you are listening to this, then you won. I knew you would. You have a spine of steel. My girl, just like me. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall. I know what you found out. She continued. I know you found the court order. I know about the money I paid to keep you. I want you to listen to me very carefully. Her voice wavered, then strengthened. You were never a burden. You were the best investment I ever made. I didn't pay for you because you were a problem. I paid for you because you were priceless. Do not let their greed define your worth. You are not a transaction. Vivian, you are my granddaughter. And you are free. The tape clicked off. I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the truth. I was loved, not by the people who gave me life, but by the person who gave me a future. I heard a creak on the floorboards downstairs. I froze. I turned off the lamp and walked to the landing. The front door was open. A figure stood in the entryway, illuminated by the porch light. It was Harold. He didn't look like the man who had screamed at me. He didn't look like the man who had tried to steal a house. He looked like an old man who had forgotten where he lived. He looked up and saw me at the top of the stairs. "Vivian?" he asked. His voice was small, cracked. I didn't answer. I stood my ground, my hand resting on the banister. He took a step inside, then stopped. He looked around the empty hallway, at the shadows where the family photos used to hang. "Is it really over?" he asked. He wasn't asking about the lawsuit. He was asking about the facade. He was asking about the lie that had sustained him for 30 years. I looked down at him. I felt the ache in my chest, the phantom pain of the father I had wanted him to be, the father who would have protected me, not sold me, the father who would have been proud of me, not threatened by me. But that father didn't exist. He never had. I looked at Harold Henderson, a man who had sold his soul for appearances and ended up with neither. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I simply turned around and walked back into my grandmother's room, closing the door softly, firmly. Between us, it wasn't just over. It was finally, mercifully, gone. Thank you for listening to Leave and Never Return. This story explored the deep, painful cost of breaking generational cycles and finding the truth buried under years of silence. I would love to hear your thoughts on Vivian's journey. Did she make the right choice? Where are you listening from today? Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your reaction to the ending. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more narratives about justice, family secrets, and the fight for truth, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Your support helps us bring these hidden worlds to light.